Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. We got another showdown, Landis, today because we need some ball talk back in our blood, because I just have been lying on the couch for the past 48 hours staring at the ceiling thinking about the future of college football. And I need to think about Michigan's linebackers and Utah's running back room and Chip Lindsey and Jason Beck. Chip Lindsey and Jason Beck, save us. So we're going to open the show with the Utah versus Michigan KOTN Showdown.
We need a palate cleanser and a reminder that college football, whatever's going to happen in the future, will be on the field this fall, and we're excited about that.
Yeah, so we like to pair up our teams for our KOTN Showdowns based on like maybe having something in common. And the reason we paired up Michigan and Utah is these are two great winning programs that had down years last year and have new quarterbacks and new offensive coordinators coming to save them. Kind of. What did you think of pairing up Michigan and Utah this way?
I think they're similar in that way. I think they're similar in probably what the hallmarks of their programs to be, and sort of what they have been historically, which is very good defense, running the football, a level of physicality and technical proficiency, I guess, that gets them to their winning way. So I think ideologically they're pretty similar programs, and very much so. I believe that Michigan with Chip Lindsey and Bryce Underwood, and Utah with Jason Beck and Devin Dampier, different mixes there, but both looking for those tandems to kind of elevate them out of what were down years last year.
So we will end the show with what you watch and what you eat and what you're thinking. And then the middle part of the show, we are going to try to provide some context through the history of the NCAA Committee on Infractions and how they have ruled on things in the past, because Michigan is going before the Committee on Infractions this Friday and Saturday. Those are the dates that have been reported for a long time. It seemed by in various areas. I think by Dan Wetzel, by Pat Forty. I think you're noticing some Michigan reports this morning, sort of confirming that. It doesn't mean we're going to get a decision on Michigan on Monday. If they have the hearing on Friday and Saturday, you're probably looking 30, 45 days until that decision comes about. But before the season starts, probably sometime in August. And so what we want to lay down is a history of vacated titles. Not that we think Michigan's title is going to be vacated, but it is something that some folks have been throwing out there as an idea. Based on history, like what would that actually mean? And then I looked up, with the help of some previous reporting by some folks who did a great job, the history of postseason bans, of bowl bans among power conference football teams, and how common are they? And if that's a thing that would happen to Michigan, Landis, like what would be the context of that? So we're going to look at those two things for context. We're not going to guess what's going to happen. But I think to give people that idea ahead of time, anything else that may happen to Michigan, you lose a couple scholarships, maybe you vacate some wins but you're not vacating a national title, right? Like you get fined. That's a thing that the NCAA is doing more now, that they're trying to hammer you with money without taking opportunities away from current athletes who maybe didn't have anything to do with what happened in the past. That would fit to me more under the scope of things that happen to programs. But I think the things I want to look at are the two biggest things: if they would vacate a title, and if they would have a playoff ban, bowl ban going forward for a year or two. Those are the two biggest outcomes, right?
100%. Yeah. The rewriting of history, one, and because the bowl ban then impacts, I think, from roster building. We've seen in the past, like players decide they want to go elsewhere because they're not going to have an opportunity to play in the postseason. So that would be potentially quite crippling for Michigan in the short term if that were to happen,
especially in the portal era. And by the way, like that'll do that so much anymore. So like it's not a very common thing. So anyway, we're looking for context, and then we'll talk about sailboat pizza. We're going to start with ball, though. We've done Penn State versus Notre Dame. We've done BYU versus Indiana. We've done Nebraska versus Washington. And what's the other one we just did?
Rutgers
versus Kansas. Rutgers versus Kansas.
Yeah.
Can I tease Whatcha a little bit? By the way, one more tease on Whatcha, by the way. Okay. That's my tease. You couldn't hear it, but you could only see it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Utah and Michigan. Last year, Utah was 5-7. Michigan was 8-5. I tilted my head down. If you're listening on a podcast, it's like, what did Doug do? What did he do? Did he pull a sword out of somewhere weird? No, I just tilted my head down. Utah 5-7. Michigan 8-5. Last year for Utah was its first losing season since 2013.
Mm-hmm.
Utah started 4-0, lost 7 straight, won their last game. They were 1-5 in one-score games last year, Bill. Utah was. Michigan was 5-1 in one-score games. Michigan's 8-5 could have been worse, but like credit to them, especially at the end of the year, beating Ohio State, beating Alabama. And Michigan, by the way, 8-5, lost to teams that finished 1-3, 8, and 20 in the college football playoff rankings at the end of the regular season. And then, by the way, they also beat 6-11 because Ohio State was 6 and Alabama was 11. They beat Alabama in the bowl game. So some context here. Utah plus 700 to win the Big 12 on the FanDuel odds. That's tied for the 4th favorite. Michigan plus 1,100 to win the Big 10. That's the 4th favorite in the Big 10. So like positioned similarly going into this year. Utah 7.5 win total. Michigan 8.5 win total. The last 10 years, Michigan's 97-30. Utah's 82-43. They're both pretty good. Okay. We got some context there on the Utes and the Wolverines.
We do have some context, but also I think a bit of damning context as it pertains to Utah. Because I was going to say, well, it's hard to win one-score games when you don't have a quarterback. It's like, well, Michigan did it. Michigan did it. Michigan played a tougher schedule with similar roster dynamics and managed to get 8 wins, and Utah's season fell off a cliff.
It's funny, as it was happening, I think the story was the defending national champs have a terrible weakness that is ruining their season. And then to beat Ohio State and Alabama at the end and then look back this way, it's like, man, is it at least partly the defending champs had an unbelievable defense that prevented their season from completely going off the rails, for instance, in a way that it did for Utah?
I think so, yeah. As it was happening, I was not thinking to myself, boy, this is actually kind of impressive that Michigan found a way to 8 wins. But looking back on it, it actually was pretty impressive.
Yeah. Congratulations. No, you didn't come out of those games like they lose to Washington or whatever. It's like, oh man, I'll tell you what though. Those scrappy Wolverines, they could easily be 1-8 right now. You know, that's not what the vibes were. But because it is so similar how the quarterback position just destroyed them. Now, Utah's more of the, more bad luck, Cam Rising, the injury, and then having a true freshman as the backup. Like part of that's on them. Both of those ways, right? That, well, you're relying on Cam Rising. And by the way, Bryson Barnes had been an okay backup for you the year before, but then he leaves and it winds up that Isaac Wilson as a true freshman is your backup for a quarterback with a history of injury.
Yeah.
It's some bad luck, but it's also kind of on you. And then the idea that Michigan just wound up where they wound up at quarterback. You understand why they didn't go in the portal in the offseason because things were crazy. But by the way, they had some really talented players, as the NFL draft showed us, and they kind of wasted them because they completely whiffed on the most important position.
Hard to overcome just ignoring quarterback when you know you're probably short there. But lesson learned, I think, for Michigan.
Lesson learned all around for everybody. So let's start with quarterback for a KOTN showdown. What's the situation? You're doing Utah, by the way. I'm doing Michigan. And by the way, we also already did like 75 minutes on Bryce Underwood, the Michigan quarterback, a couple months ago. So we don't have to do another 75 on him. And we've also talked a lot about Devin Dampier, but what's the deal with the Utah quarterback situation?
I have a trivia question for you first. Do you know how many different starting quarterbacks Utah has used over the last 2 seasons?
Different starting quarterbacks? 5?
6. Yeah.
Okay.
Which I think is a lot. Does that qualify as a lot? Over a 2-year stretch, 6 different starting quarterbacks.
Yeah, that does qualify.
And like Cam Rising didn't start at all in 2023, started last year. So I think Devin Dampier has an opportunity to, one, stabilize, which Utah desperately needs, but also elevate because of how dynamic of a player he is. Mostly as a runner, but he's not a bad passer. I think he has to make some strides as a passer. If you look at some of his numbers broken down, like when he's throwing off a play action and when he's not, there's a pretty stark difference there, especially when it comes to turnovers. He's much better not turning the ball over when he's playing off a play action because of the threat that he presents as a runner himself. So we'll have to make some progress there. I think it'll help him that he's working with Jason Beck, who was his offensive coordinator at New Mexico, is now the
Mhm.
offensive coordinator at Utah. As we said, he has some familiar weapons with him too. A receiver from New Mexico came over, a running back from New Mexico came over. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity for Devin Dampier to take a step forward and ignite the Utah offense in a way that it desperately needs, because it's just sort of been dormant really since 2022. Healthy Cam Rising, Utah's offense was good. Without him, it's been quite terrible. So I like a lot of what Devin Dampier brings to the table. I think you could ask yourself, well, will it translate from the Mountain West to the Big 12, which I think is a fair question. I was actually looking through like the up transfers last year in the 2024 quarterback portal class, and there actually are a handful of success stories. The one I think I find most interesting for Devin Dampier's purposes is Diego Pavia, who was at New Mexico State and transferred to Vanderbilt and played in the SEC and seemed to translate quite well. It was actually arguably maybe even a little better at Vanderbilt than he was at New Mexico State. So like that would give me confidence if I'm a Utah fan, if I'm wondering the same thing about Devin Dampier. He's incredibly elusive. I think I would say if you just look at some of the stats, he was probably the most difficult quarterback to sack last year. Teams didn't blitz him a lot, and when they did, it didn't work. His pressure to sack rate is the best in the country. New Mexico only gave up 5 sacks all year. Utah gave up quite a few sacks last year because their quarterbacks weren't entirely mobile, or they were young, like Isaac Wilson, who had no idea what he was doing when he had to be mobile. So, and you get 2 years of Devin Dampier too, hypothetically.
Yes.
So that's maybe the biggest key in all of this is not only was he incredibly productive at New Mexico and is a run pass threat and just gives you a lot of options in that way, but you also have 2 years to build around him.
Tice is in the chat. Same stuff for 3 years and aren't a damn thing going to happen. Now we're comparing Utah to Michigan. These dudes are dirtbags. Now you know why nobody watches you guys. Delusional as hell. I accidentally swore twice in there. So thanks for being here, Tice.
I like dirtbag as an insult. It's underutilized.
Yeah, because it actually hurts more than a swear word sometimes. Because like a dirt. Yeah. So anyway, we welcome all comers here. Thank you for being here. By the way, do you know what is an interesting thing about this? I think we have made it pretty clear we are kind of all in on the idea of the New Mexico offensive coordinator and quarterback coming to save Utah. Fair to say?
Yes.
You know what New Mexico was last year? What their record was?
Yeah, they had 5 wins.
Yeah, they were 5-7. Do you know who Michigan opens the season with this year?
New Mexico?
New Mexico. Oh. And you know what I did when I looked at the schedule for Michigan? I was like, New Mexico, they're definitely going to win that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like is it like this is what the world, this is how this world works now. I still have the instinct to completely ignore and blow off G5 teams when they're playing P4 contenders, right? I just still have that. But meanwhile, when G5 up transfers are coming to P4 teams, I'm like, oh, baby, watch out for that. So is that incongruous, or does that actually make sense that there are individual excellent people at programs like New Mexico? You have a great coach, you have a great skill player, you might have a great offensive lineman or a great guy at safety, but you don't have 22 of them. And so when you play a team like Michigan, you're probably going to get your doors blown off, but you might have a quarterback who can go save Utah.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. Five wins, by the way, for New Mexico was incredible. Like, I don't think they had a winning season since like 2016 or 2013 or something like that. They've been a pretty awful football program that I think a lot of people believe shouldn't even be a Division I football program. So, like, for them to get 5 wins, which is like largely on the back of what Devin Dampier was able to do at quarterback, is no small feat. You know?
Yeah, we need to look at it that way. Devin Dampier maybe made a 1-11 team go 5-7. So now if you put him with some Utah talent and 2 NFL tackles and a great portal running back and an unbelievable head coach, and then you have some stuff. Okay. So we're excited about Devin Dampier. We think he's going to be pretty good. Did you go back and watch the Michigan spring game? I rewatched it again this week.
I actually have not watched the Michigan spring game, though. I saw some of the highlights of it.
So I'm big on just like, how does a guy look when he's standing around? I don't care how he plays. I care how he stands. I did get some Justin Fields vibes watching Bryce Underwood. So Justin Fields, his first year at Ohio State, 6'4", 228 on the roster. Bryce Underwood, 6'4", 208. So he's a young guy who's rounding into shape, right? He's kind of got skinny legs. I think he has he's just going to grow into his body a little bit more. I think he's going to muscle up. So I think he's going to get there, but just a little bit of the vibes. And then watching, and this is not breaking news. Anybody, like a million people watch this and already commented on the Michigan spring game, just a little hot, just some throws that were a little hot, and you can just see, and this is like a big thing with quarterbacks, especially when they're young. You can have a great arm, but you learn the touch, right? So are you throwing all 101 mile per hour fastballs, or can you work in a slider and a splitter and like other things, make balls more catchable? He feels like a guy he's able to throw those free money outs, just give me 12 yards on a little out cut. And you could see he didn't do much like in the run game. They're just not going to do that. But you can see how he's going to be a threat in the zone read. And when he decides to keep it a couple times with a great backfield, and we'll get to that in a second, how he's going to be a threat. He did go at least twice on scrambles, and it was like, okay, I see what's going on there. And then he's just a little hot on some throws. So 12-26 for 187, and about half of that was an 88-yard double reverse flea flicker to end the game, which, by the way, I get it. They're just having a good time. He did feather the ball. That was probably the nicest touch he had on a ball. The guy was open, and he hit him, but he also didn't overthrow him. And he had a play earlier in the game where he had a guy open in the end zone by 6 yards and overthrew him on a deep ball, and he's just a little hot. But he's hot because his arm is live, man. Like he can rip it. So there's a lot there that you just absolutely see how this is going to progress. And so then it's a situation in a comparison like this where Devin Dampier's already done it. Do you take him because he's been through it already, or do you take what the upside of Bryce Underwood is and what he might be by November? Because man, there is so much there.
I probably will, for just this 1 year, I would probably take the more known commodity. I think Bryce Underwood's going to be great. He's also like a very young freshman too. I think he's going to play most of this season, if not all of it, at age 18, right? So, and I don't know, like we've seen freshman quarterbacks be successful plenty of times before. Is everything else in place around him to help him through that? I don't know the answer, and it's not that I don't love Utah skill, as we'll talk about, but I think Dan Pierre is more equipped to like solve problems right now than Bryce Underwood is a true freshman. So for a 1 year 2025, who would you rather have? I think I would take Dan Pierre.
Okay. I'll go with that. We'll take Utah quarterback here. And it's just acknowledging the very difficult evaluation of an 18-year-old guy who's and if Mikey Keene starts the beginning of the year for Michigan, it doesn't feel like anybody really thinks that anymore. Mikey Keene had an injury in the spring, and Underwood took advantage of the opportunity. We're slowly treading into the water up to our ankles with Bryce Underwood, but we are ready to dive in as soon as he gives any indication. And also, when you have a young guy like that, I do think sometimes, okay, if you're learning on the fly, but also if things get a little hairy, you can just get out of the pocket and run for 25 yards. That can be quite effective too. But we'll take Dan Pierre. But the excitement and potential and upside around the quarterback situations for both teams compared to what they were last year, compared to the realities of last year, it's tenfold, is it not, for both?
Yeah, I think these are two of the more exciting quarterback situations in college football for different reasons. Yes. But like if I were either one of these fan bases, I'm fired up about quarterback.
Okay. Let's go to skill, and we'll just go to skill with this acknowledgement. The 24/7 transfer portal, running backs, highest rated running back transfers. Number 3 was Justice Haynes, who went from Alabama to Michigan. And I think that's right. Wait, am I looking at? No, number 1. And Wayshawn Parker, who went from Washington State to Utah, he was 3, right? Is that right? Now I'm looking up this.
I think he was 4.
Very high. Yeah. I looked at the wrong thing.
Both good.
The 1 and the 3. 24/7 Sports, RBs, running backs in the portal. Haynes to Michigan was 1. Parker to Utah was 4. Huge additions for these backfields, but let's start with Utah skill.
Yeah, I think you like running back if you're Utah, because you had Wayshawn Parker from Washington State. Was good as a freshman last year, 735 yards, 4 touchdowns. efficient. I think some explosiveness and reasonable hope that he'll keep building on that. And he shared a backfield with John Mateer last year, so he's used to a running quarterback, which is what Devin Dampier is. So I think all that meshes really well. Utah also brought in Nakari Rogers from New Mexico, who was one of the running backs for New Mexico last year, averaged 5 yards a carry on 74 carries. So I think with those two guys, you're okay at running back. Basically, everyone who carried the ball last year for Utah is gone. So it is a lot of transfer, sort of all up and down the skill positions. But I think running back can be okay. Receiver is a much bigger question mark for Utah.
Okay.
It's unfortunate. Like, you read some of the stuff that was happening for Utah in the spring, and while they were looking for someone to emerge as a receiver, it seemed like Zacharias was, I don't know if it's Zacharias or Zacharias, so I apologize. Zach Williams was emerging as the number one receiver, and then he transferred to USC. So
that was rough.
I don't know. And it's not even like he was like a proven productive player. It was just like he was the guy who was popping in the spring and then he left. So there's basically no returning production from guys who were on the roster last year. It's going to be, I think, a lot of transfer hope. Ryan Davis from New Mexico was New Mexico's number 2 receiver last year. Had something like 84 targets, I think, in that offense. So there's a familiarity there with him and Dampier and Jason Beck, which I think is good. I'd imagine he's going to come out the number 1 guy for them in the fall. Creed Whitmore is a Mississippi State transfer who hasn't played a whole lot, but he was a 4-star prospect in the 2023 recruiting class. Maybe there's something there. They added Otto Tia from Utah State, who is pretty productive, but it sounds like he's going to move to tight end. So he's more of like a I guess he's on the smaller side for tight end because he's like 220 pounds, but can provide them some pretty good pass catching from that position. Supposedly, we'll see. And then they also added late Tobias Merriweather, who was at Notre Dame and then went to Cal. Like, big body. People always thought he had a ton of potential. It's never really happened for him. So he's a little bit of a wild card, but I don't know what Utah's receivers are going to look like this year. I don't know how dynamic they're going to be. I don't know how much that'll matter with maybe the way they're going to be able to run the ball, but it is no doubt a huge question for them. And then tight end, similar, I think, a question. Like I said, Otto Tia is going to play there. They have an older guy named Dallin Bentley, who's a third-year player who's played 400 snaps, who's more of a blocker than he is a pass catcher. But I guess the one thing you bank on with tight end in Utah is they do have a pretty good history of development there. So maybe that position can be okay. So I would say running back looks solid. Tight end, probably okay. Receiver, don't know. Very much up in the air.
I think that's the exact same way you described Michigan. This was the stat that I was looking at that screwed me up. Based on high school recruiting rankings, Justice Haynes, transferring from Alabama, was the number 3 running back in the 2023 recruiting class, and Jordan Marshall, their second-year guy, was the number 4 running back in the 2024 recruiting class. So they have 2 running backs who were top 4 recruits at their positions at Michigan. And I think this backfield could be better than the Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards backfield that had Blake Corum on the edge of the Heisman race. And when he got hurt, Donovan Edwards came in. This is 2 years ago. Donovan Edwards came in and like destroyed Ohio State with one hand. And I think they could be better. This has a chance to be one of the best running back rooms in the country. I'm not prepared to have that full conversation, and we certainly acknowledge Katron Allen and Nick Singleton at Penn State among the other ones you have to think about. But this has a chance. Michigan did this a lot. I think Michigan has a pretty good handle on how to build a roster in the modern era. They have their guys on the way up, and then they supplement them with a guy from the portal anyway. And it's not a lot of desperation in the portal, but it's a lot of addition. And you have a lot of positions at Michigan right now where they have their own guy who was a backup or a co-starter in previous years who is expected to rise up to a bigger role. And then they put another guy with him who has more experience from outside. And Ohio State did a similar thing with James Peoples at running back and adding CJ Donaldson from West Virginia. But Haynes is a bigger addition than Donaldson. So I think this running back room has a chance to be really, really good. Am I overselling the Haynes and Marshall combination?
The 2022 combo of Corum and Edwards was pretty freaking good. 2023 was not as good because Blake Corum hurt his knee at the end of 2022. Was never quite the same player. And Edwards didn't really take that next step. But 2022 Corum Edwards is going to be pretty tough to beat for any running back tandem.
to have these guys in that conversation? You in or no?
I would stop a step short of that. I really like Jordan. I like Jordan Marshall a lot. Haynes, he's fine. A good recruiting pedigree, I think, is more theory than production at this point. I'd like to see what that looks like when he gets more of a workload.
So I do think Bama screwed him up last year. So he was the number 2 back at Bama last year. Jim Miller was the number 1 running back, but they both were sidecar guys to Jalen Milroe in the run game.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Bama running backs last year didn't get used a lot and weren't very good. But Jim Miller, as the number 1 back, averaged 4.6 yards per carry. Justice Haynes averaged 5.7 yards per carry. Justice Haynes had 1 game last year with 10 carries. He had 13 carries against South Florida. The rest of the year, he had like 8 carries in every game. So they didn't use him. And it was a weird offense. And then before that, he was a freshman at Alabama. So he didn't make sort of like the second-year jump with that history of Bama running back, but it's because Bama was screwy last year. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he did anything at Alabama that would make you think, okay, he didn't live up to his recruiting pedigree. I just think he got caught in a weird situation. And I think he has a chance as a third-year guy this season to play like a 5-star recruit. And then if you do that, now you're off to the races. So So I do think, and then Marshall is just on the path, was a backup last year, second-year guy. You expect more of him, was a big-time recruit. I think the backfield has a chance to be great. Receiver, just like Utah. Couple veteran guys back, Samaj Morgan and Frederick Moore, who were both part of the passing game last year. They added Donovan McCulley in the transfer portal from Indiana and Anthony Simpson in the transfer portal from UMass. Both those guys started to play last year and then stopped themselves and said, I'm done. I want a red shirt. I'm going to go in the portal. Mm-hmm. So kind of weird. Like they really didn't play much last year, and now you're relying on them a lot. McCulley's a big guy. We talked about how Sharon Moore likes big receivers now. He had 48 catches for 644 yards 2 years ago. Anthony Simpson's a small guy, 5'11", 180. Was at Arizona before he went to UMass 2 years ago, had 792 receiving yards. But they both did nothing last year, and they might be their top 2 receivers. But again, they're trying to get a mix here. 2 transfers, 2 guys on the roster who have played, and then a true freshman in Andrew Marsh, who was number 82 overall recruit in this class. He's the highest rated receiver recruit for Michigan since 2017. So that's 5 guys, 2 transfers, 2 returnees, and a true freshman. And can you make a room somewhere out of those 5 guys? I think you have a shot to. If Donovan McCulley is projecting as your number 1 receiver, I think that's a step below most playoff teams. So you've really got to be good at some other things. And I'm very curious if Andrew Marsh can make a gigantic leap, but the idea of asking a true freshman to come in and reshape your passing game, and Chip Lindsey wants to throw it. He wants to get more balance. I'm not sure about their skill at receiver to do it.
Freshman can do it though. Like if you said we're really gonna need a freshman to carry us, I think the 2 positions you'd feel okay about that happening are receiver and running back. Right? Yeah. So I don't know.
Brothers, they're not brothers. Nick Marsh at Michigan State last year was awesome as a true freshman. So can Andrew Marsh?
Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams were great last year as true freshmen. So I'm not comparing him to those guys. I'm just saying, I think a freshman can make an impact. McCulley's interesting. If you look at Simpson's numbers 2 years ago at UMass, he had some juice after the catch. So, I don't know. Neither one of these receivers rooms are like blowing your doors off. But I think if you look at maybe the potential, you like Michigan a little more.
Martin Klein at tight end was the same recruiting class as Colston Loveland's 4th-year guy, kind of was just behind Loveland the whole time. He has to kind of rise into that role. Hogan Hansen's a 6'6", second-year guy, has some potential, played 93 offensive snaps last year as a true freshman. And then Jalen Hoffman, 6'3", 235. Sharon Moore called him the MVP of the spring game. Quote, he's a super athletic kid with really great ball skills and hands. So Michigan needs great tight ends. It's going to be a drop-off from Colston Loveland, who was as good as anybody in the country last year, probably outside of Tyler Warren. So that's tough. Really good at running back, uncertain at the people you're throwing the ball to. So I think I lean Michigan for the skill, but I think they're just very similar to Utah in a lot of ways.
I lean Michigan. I think Michigan running back has potential to be better than Utah. Maybe it's slightly better, but I still think better. I think upside at receiver favors Michigan, even if it's all kind of uncertain. And then tight end, both these programs are good at developing tight ends, but Michigan's probably slightly better. So
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'd go Michigan.
All right. O-line. What do you got for Utah?
We've talked about Utah's O-line.
We
8
have.
players made starts last year. Seven of them are back. All 5 starters are back. It'll be difficult for you to find a better tackle tandem than Spencer Fano at right tackle and Caleb Lomu at left tackle. I think, the 3 interior starters are back. They probably need to be a little bit better than they were last year. Of all those guys who are returning, Fano was the only one who got like any all Big 12 love. He was first team last year. We did an offensive line show where I talked about the block rating, right? Combining sort of all those statistics together to figure out who played well on the offensive line last year. Utah did not come out looking great there. Like despite having decent continuity and a lot of guys returning, I think a lot of that is a byproduct of the quarterback carousel that Utah went through. Not a whole lot of skill. Okay running the ball, but just like offensive linemen need some guys around them to kind of help them out. And I don't think Utah had that last year. And I think Utah should have it this year. And has an incredibly elusive quarterback in Dampier who should help lower the sack number for Utah this season. So I think it's going to be a really good offensive line. The tackles are excellent. It's just a matter of like then the 3 interior guys who are all returning starters, can they take another step forward? But I would imagine like Utah very well could have the best offensive line in the Big 12, and when the season's over, something like a top 5-10 offensive line in the country.
I think Utah's going to win this, but Michigan will be better than last year. We talked a lot about how Washington's offensive line, when they made the national title game in 23, was so good, and then they lost everybody, and they were just desperate in 24. Michigan was certainly not that bad in terms of drop-off, but not dissimilar. They lost like 6 NFL guys off the offensive line from 23. PFF grades in 2023, they were 82. No, excuse me. They're I don't know about if this is the right thing. Bottom line, pass blocking, they were 2 years ago in the national title season, they were 9th in pass blocking by PFF. Last year, they were 50th. So there was definitely a drop-off there. And here's how they're trying to build it back. 2 pretty sure veterans in the middle. Greg Crippen at center, who took over the last 2/3 of last year, is going to be the center. Giovanni Al-Hadi was the right guard last year, had played left guard previously, is moving back to left guard, and has said he's much more comfortable on the left side. Josh Preeb came in last year as a transfer, took left guard. They asked him to move to right, and he wasn't as good. So left guard and center, pretty set. Andrew Sprague is like what you're supposed to do on the offensive line. He's a top 150 national recruit. He's a second-year guy. He played a little bit last year, played right tackle in the bowl game against Alabama, played pretty well. Looks like he's the right tackle. So young guy, but on the path you want him to be on. Left tackle's a competition. Evan Link, who was the right tackle last year and wasn't very good as a young guy, got benched for Andrew Gentry, who then got hurt, and then Evan Link had to play again, and then Andrew Gentry transferred to BYU, and we talked about how important he is for BYU this year. Evan Link might be the left tackle. They also added Brady Norton who was the starting left tackle at Cal Poly last year at the FCS level, was pretty good. But they also have Andrew Babalola, who is a true freshman, 5-star, and what if he wins a left tackle job? And that is pretty darn interesting. And then at right guard, it's a similar kind of thing. They have a guy kind of on the way up who's been on the roster, and they also have a transfer who could work in there. So it could be Nathan Afobe, who's the inside guy, 3rd-year guy, or Lawrence Hatter is a Division II All-American at Ferris State. So the bottom line here is this. They have 2 veteran starters who they feel good about. They have a young right tackle they feel pretty good about. They have 2 younger guys in the battle at left tackle and right guard. They have 2 transfers in the battle at left tackle and right guard. And they have a true freshman wild card. So between all those things, can you make an offensive line out of those 8 guys? I like how they go about it. They're developing guys on the they're developing guys on the inside of the program. They're adding 2 up transfers who started last year and played well. And they have a true freshman who maybe, if he blows you away in August, and Sharon Moore has opened the door on that, if he blows you away in August or the other guys don't seize it, maybe could help you. How do you feel about that group?
I think by the end of the year, Michigan will have a pretty good offensive line. I don't love all those moving parts and taking him on the road to Oklahoma in week 2.
Yeah,
That seems like quite a
yeah.
like so like I think it could be a situation where maybe trying to figure out the answers on the offensive line might lead Michigan to perhaps even dropping a game or two like before Halloween. But they'll figure it out by the end. I'm very curious to see if Babalola ends up cracking the starting lineup at some point. Like do I love the idea of true freshman left tackle, true freshman quarterback? Not entirely, but if you're going to do it, those are two pretty good guys to do it with. So it felt like, and maybe it was almost inevitable that coming off the championship season, Michigan was going to have a dip on the offensive line and like have to rebuild it a little bit. And I don't think they did a great job of that last year, but it seems like they got it pointed back in the right direction. But maybe that is a year plus build up back to where Michigan would like to be ultimately on the offensive line. I don't know if they're going to get there all the way this year.
Yeah. It's like if one of the transfers really pops and can help you, if one of the guys developing from the inside pops and can really help you, if the young guy at right tackle, like, and it's one of those things with Evan Link last year, like just went through a meat grinder and kind of wasn't ready for it. But now he's moving back to the left side, which I think is more natural for him than right tackle was. And now he's been through it. So did last year prove that maybe he's just not a starting caliber tackle at a place like Michigan? Or was last year the meat grinder that turns him into a very solid Big Ten lineman this year? We have no idea. But that's a huge deal. But the idea of if you get the bad answer to that, then it's like, well, I guess we'll just play the 5-star. There's an answer. I feel like there are a lot of questions on the Michigan offensive line, but I think there's a possible answer to every question. But Utah has a better offensive line.
Yeah, it's got to be Utah here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Defensive front 7. What does Utah have?
Before I get into the front 7, I will say just sort of generally, my view on Utah throughout the offseason has been I like what they've done offensively. I expect them to take a step forward. I'm nervous about how much they've lost defensively. And then diving back into it, like yes, Utah did lose a lot of guys, but I actually think they could be okay. But I think the biggest questions you would have are on the defensive line. Lose a lot of beef at tackle. Junior Tafuna graduated. Keanu Tanabasa transferred to BYU. Samote Pepa transferred to Washington. There were 3 of the 4 guys who played the most last year. Aliki Vamahi is back and would have played more last year. He got injured and he missed a lot of the season. He's played more than 1,000 career snaps. This will be his 5th season. He's like a leader. He's made 13 starts. I think they like what he's done this spring. So I actually think he'll step up and be a starter and probably be fine. Next to him is Dallas Vakalahi, who is an older freshman, came back from an LDS mission last year as a true freshman, played 249 snaps. He's a big dude, 313 pounds. So he'll be an older sophomore, I guess, this year. Those are your 2 starters. I think are solid, but there's no known depth. They're going to need young guys to step up. They even added a transfer after spring ball, a true freshman from LSU named Dylan Battle, who spent spring ball with LSU and then transferred to Utah. I think the biggest questions for Utah's defense arrive sort of in defensive tackle depth and then the other defensive end spot. Logan Fano is back at one of the edge spots. Good player, probably needs to take a step forward, but was productive is not the right word, but like he's just like a good player who you want to see more sack production, I guess, but solid run and pass. And then who's going to play next to him? Couple transfers Utah added. Paul Fitzgerald actually transferred 2 years ago from Utah State. Played some last year, wasn't all that good, but he was pretty productive at Utah State in 2023. I think Utah would like to see more of that out of Paul Fitzgerald this year. Lance Holtzclaw from Washington transferred over, and Jackson Jones transferred over from Oregon. He's a second-year player. He was a 4-star prospect in the 2024 recruiting class. So it's Logan Fano and I think some question marks at defensive end. Linebacker should be quite good. Lander Barton is back. He's played a ton. He's played 1,500 career snaps. Lavani Damuni started 2 years ago. He's played over 2,000 career snaps at Stanford and Utah, but he got hurt and he missed all of last season. So those 2 starting, Barton and Damuni, should be very good. And then Jonathan Hall is a converted safety who played 300 snaps at linebacker last year, was also pretty good. So they have a pretty good top 3 there with Barton, Damuni, and Hall. They just have to stay healthy. But in front of them on the defensive line, I do think Utah is probably a little short there compared to what it would have liked to be historically.
Okay. So our guy John preemptively got in with the askkotn@gmail.com, knowing we were doing Michigan Utah today, got in with with some points about the Michigan defensive line that he wanted to point out to us before we even talked about it. And I will say, John, thank you for the email, but I agreed with everything you said, and it's that the Michigan defensive line is going to be good. And they lost 3 studs in Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, and Josiah Stewart. And I think John's point is, are they going to be as good? No, but it doesn't mean they're not going to be good. And so you have to think of the context. But also, there was basically 7 guys who played on the Michigan defensive line last year and 4 back. So they lost 3 stars. But they have some guys back who were really good and have played. And Derek Moore, I think, has a chance to be an All-American. So last year, pass rush win rate among Power 4 edge guys, he was 4th in the nation. Josiah Stewart, his teammate, was 1st. Abdul Carter was 8th, for example. And also TJ Kai, who was the 3rd edge guy last year, is going to be the other starter at edge this year, was 12th. I think some proof that it's easier to win your battles on the edge when Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are giving offensive coordinators fits on the inside, and you're trying to block those guys. But Derek Moore is great. And it was a big deal that he stayed. He had 2 sacks in the bowl game against Alabama. Rewatch the highlights of that. He walked Elijah Pritchett, who transferred to Nebraska, is going to start at Nebraska this year, the right tackle for Bama last year. First drive of the game, he walked him back into Jalen Milroe. If you want to see a guy just physically abuse somebody, Derek Moore, just 7 steps. He's just Pritchett's just going backwards from the jump. Just a great bull rush. And then he had another one where he just beat Caden Proctor, the left tackle, inside and just got past him before he could do anything. He got another sack on Milroe. I think Moore's going to be awesome. TJ Guy, the other side, really good. The tackles, Rayshon Benny played a lot last year. Very good. Cam Brandt, probably a 3rd guy at edge, also really good last year. Rayshon Benny's a great player. And then, as John pointed out, but I had you, John. I got you. 2 really good transfers inside. Damon Payne from Alabama, Trey Williams from Clemson. The 24/7 portal rankings, Trey Williams was the number 10 defensive tackle in the portal. Payne was number 23. They both were in the rotation at Clemson and Alabama last year, and they're going to be good. And then there's a couple other move-up guys, Trey Pierce, Eno Etta. They just have bodies. They develop guys. They play their younger guys to get them a couple snaps. But I think between Moore, Guy, and Brandt at edge, and between Benny, Payne, and Williams inside, and then some other depth guys elsewhere, I think they're going to be really good.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's always a good distinction to make, right? Like when a defensive line is excellent and loses guys, you can still be good without being like elite, right? And I think and who knows, maybe Michigan will end up having an elite defensive line. Like the last couple of years, they've been very good, even in the face of some roster turnover. So, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are difficult guys to replace. But I think Michigan will be just fine up front. Yeah, I think this will be a good defensive line.
Really good portal moves with the defensive tackles. And then the other part of the front 4 discussion is that Jayshon Barham, one of the 2 starting linebackers, is going to do a little bit more of that edge stuff. The things that we see now with these linebackers who you want to get him after the passer a little bit. He had 20 pressures last year. So Abdul Carter, it's not going to be quite like that. But they like their linebacker depth enough that I think they are, and the coaches have talked about it. The D-line coaches talked about it. Wink Martindale, the defensive coordinators, talked about it. Barham's going to get more looks at edge, but Ernest Hausman and Jayshon Barham, Hausman a Nebraska transfer, Barham a Maryland transfer. They were the 2 starting linebackers last year. They're both back to be the starters this year, but they like their depth enough. Cole Sullivan, top 300 recruit, good spring, good athlete, kind of raw last year, but did play a little bit. And then Jimmy Rolder's a 4th-year guy, played 200 snaps last year. I think they like Rolder and Sullivan enough that if they want to move Barham around, they're okay at linebacker. So, and then Barham's a wild card of like, okay, now you know how it is. You drop more inside and you bring Barham down, and all of a sudden you have 3 edge guys on the field on 3rd down, and you can still play coverage with the backers. More than enough. I think the front 7 is definitely Michigan here, but I think more than enough to be like really good.
I think I agree. I think the only place between these two teams where it's even close is at linebacker, but I still give the edge of Michigan, and then Michigan I think is significantly better.
Yeah.
On the defensive line. Yeah, I think this front seven is going to be quite good.
Yeah. So just like be on alert for that. Like, did they miss Aiden Hutchinson when he left? Yeah. Did they miss David Ajabo when he left? Yeah. Are they going to miss Mason Graham? Yeah. Kenneth Grant? Yeah. But this is kind of what Michigan does. And again, to add where maybe the hole would have been, they added 2 veteran big time transfers who were like co-starters at Clemson and Alabama who will help but they don't have to be superstars, but they patched what might have been holes. Okay. Secondary. What do you got for Utah?
I think Utah's a little better off in the secondary than it is in the front seven. At corner, Smith Snowden is back. He was the nickel last year. Was good. He'll be the nickel this year, but they also said like he's not coming off the field. We'll play him a nickel. We'll play him outside. He's their top guy, even though he's more of a nickel or more of a slot guy. He'll play a bunch. Elijah Davis ended up having to play a decent amount last year because Keenan Johnson got hurt. So he's like a quasi-returning starter too. So I think those 2 guys will start, and then they have to figure out who the third starting corner is. Utah did add 4 transfer corners in the offseason. I won't run through them all. I'll just say maybe the most interesting of them is Blake Cotton, who was a 4-star transfer for whatever that's worth from UC Davis, who started 10 games last year. I don't know that like he's not like locked that down. I think that'll be an ongoing competition to see who plays that third corner spot among all those transfers they added. But I think with Snowden and Davis back, they look okay. They lost some guys there. Cam Calhoun transferred to Alabama, which is like kind of a big deal.
It's just one of those things like we're high on Utah, but it's like, oh, by the way, their best corner transferred to Bama and their best receiver transferred to USC.
Yeah, and their best defensive tackle transferred to BYU. But at least he's still in the North.
Yeah.
It's
tough,
so
man.
It is tough. But I think corner can be okay as long as they can figure out that third spot. Safety's a little better off. Teo Johnson is back, really good at free safety last year. Rabbit Evans started 5 games at strong safety last year, and he's back. So like that's your starting tandem, and they got some pretty good depth there. So I would say that safety looks to be pretty good, if not quite good. And corner I think should be fine. So the questions for the defense in Utah are more defensive line than they are kind of back end. I think the secondaries will be solid.
Okay. The big question for Michigan is at safety and whether Rod Moore is going to be able to come back and play. So he was such an important part of their defense in the national championship year. Tore his ACL last spring, missed all of last year. He posted something on social media in mid-May that said, "This is my first time running on solid ground in 14 months." And he had a gigantic brace on his left leg. And it just was, I think people got concerned of, boy, oh boy, like it's May. You're just starting to run. So I guess like he'd been running in a pool or something. Like I don't know that there's a lot of optimism about him being ready, at least for the beginning of the year. So best of luck to Rod Moore. And he's a game changer for them.
Yeah.
He's a glue guy.
All-American candidate. He's healthy.
He's a tremendous player. So without him, Mason Curtis and Brandon Hillman are probably the safeties. They're, again, not developmental guys. They're both like top 300 national recruits who are growing into this position. Should be okay. Jair Hill, Zeke Berry, both back at corner. Berry's numbers not great last year. Played a bunch of nickel last year. Probably will play outside this year. Shamari Earls is a freshman from Virginia, was a top 100 national recruit that they flipped from Georgia. Good in the spring. True freshman, could work in at corner in some way. And they have Caleb Anderson as a transfer from Louisiana, who could also work in at corner. And then Jeremiah Lowe had 2 picks in the spring game. Nice break on an out route for one of the picks. So a bunch of decent guys. I think some potential from younger guys coming on the way up. Moore is such a big deal. I think it's questionable. I don't think it's going to be a disaster, but I think you're relying on guys like who are pretty big time recruits that have been developed to play. And then again, I like that they have a couple returning guys. They have a couple backups who are supposed to play this year. And then they have a true freshman and a transfer, right? So again, I like how they get the puzzle pieces together, but I think there's reasonable questions about this. I think it'll be fine, but I don't think we're going to know right away.
Yeah. I'm also like, Michigan's secondary, not having Will Johnson and not having Rod Moore, will do this to a lot of teams. But Michigan's secondary last year looked suspect at times.
Yeah.
But I would say like there were times where it was like, boy, Jair Hill's really getting picked on. But then I thought he started to figure it out a little bit toward the end of the year too. So like I like him. The more thing's a huge wild card. I think Zeke Berry's a good player. The rest of it, I think is fine and perhaps good enough. It's hard to say like what the ceiling is without, especially knowing what the deal with Moore is.
Yeah. So who do you think here?
I might lean Utah slightly. Just because there's like, I don't know, there's not that wild card element that you have. If you were going to tell me like Rod Moore's back and he's Rod Moore, like I'm picking Michigan, but without knowing that, I think I might lean Utah slightly.
I'll agree with that. So we'll take Utah in the secondary. What about coaching?
Kyle Whittingham has been here a long time, man.
He has been.
21st season, a rare losing season for him last year, as you mentioned. So there is program identity. There's continuity with Kyle Whittingham. I guess you could ask yourself, like, that's a long time to be around. Is there anything that's stale about that? And I think they're trying to address that with what they did on offense with getting rid of, he resigned, but I think we all know what it was. Last year, Andy Ludwig, longtime offensive coordinator, left the program kind of mid-season. They bring in Jason Beck. They're going to retool it. I think that'll be an exciting run-oriented offense. Although New Mexico, if you look at the rushing production, it's great. If you look at rushing rate, which is how often they run the ball, it's like middle of the pack. So they're not, wasn't a team that ran the ball 70% of the time last year. They were just very good when they did it with Dampier at quarterback. So I think that'll suit what Utah has personnel-wise this year. So I think Beck was a good hire. Morgan Scalley, 10th season as a defensive coordinator. He's the coach in waiting, which you've talked about. Historically, always very good on defense. I think this will be one of the bigger tests that Scalley has had in terms of like maintaining that defensive prowess with all the personnel they're losing. But it's been a while since Utah's been like outright bad on defense. I don't know that they're going to be bad this year. And then this like staff in general just has like a ton of guys who've been around for a while. 5 of the 10 assistants have been at Utah for at least 10 years. The only guys that are new are Beck at OC. They have a new running backs coach for Washington State and a new receivers coach from New Mexico who came with Beck. But otherwise, this staff is guys who've been doing it with Whittingham for a long time.
I believe in Sharon Moore. I think for a young coach, he has more scars and experiences and things to learn from and sort of like proof that he can handle it than a lot of guys going into their second year as a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree? Do you believe in Sharon Moore? Do you have questions about Sharon Moore?
I'm wait and see still. I don't know that I believe wholeheartedly. I do think like it would be interesting to me. It's an interesting what if, like if Jim Harbaugh were still the head coach at Michigan, would he have been cool with what it took to get Bryce Underwood to go to Michigan? I don't know. Harbaugh's a little old school. And I think Sharon Moore understands a little bit better, like, you know, what college football is and what it's becoming. Not that like, I don't think Sharon Moore told Larry Ellison how to spend his money, but when the opportunity presented itself, I'm sure Sharon Moore was like, yeah, let's do it.
From where Michigan was at a point last year, the four things to these four things at the end of the year: beat Ohio State, beat Alabama, win the Bryce Underwood recruiting battle, and then fire Kirk Campbell, the offensive coordinator, the day after the season ended, was transformative. And that's like Sharon Moore leading that, right? So like to think, it felt like Michigan was maybe falling off a cliff, and I think he pulled them back from the edge. So I'm going to give him credit for that. But really, I think the coaching discussion around Michigan is really more about Chip Lindsey as the offensive coordinator hire, which again is on Sharon Moore. Wink Martindale as the defensive coordinator, I think worked out maybe better than a lot of people thought last year.
Than I thought.
The defense by the FRMO index that we cite a lot in the national championship year, the number 1 ranked defense last year, 6th. So that's a lot of good players, but also that's a guy who still knew how to run that defense. Air raid principles from Lindsey. They want to be more explosive, but also they talked a lot like at North Carolina where he came from, that they ran the ball well. And he's like being able to merge sort of air raid throwing with like physical run game, but they do want to get more explosive. It to me is a lot what a year ago James Franklin was talking about with the Andy Koltelnicki hire as OC at Penn State. We need to be more explosive. Penn State went from 47 plays of 20 yards or more to 77 last year. Michigan had 35 plays of 20 yards or more last year. So they want to increase that. Moore's talking about that. I think Lindsey can do it. He has to do it, right? Now
They'll
it's
try
also,
to do it at the very least.
it's also personnel because the year before the national title year, they had 73 plays of 20 yards or more. So, when they had Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards and JJ McCarthy at quarterback instead of a mess at quarterback, like they could do that,
Yeah.
right?
Blake Corum was ripping off 20-yard runs like it was nothing
Yeah.
that year before he got hurt. Yeah.
So they had 6 completions last year of 20 yards or more, which is like unbelievably bad. And they just threw everything behind the line of scrimmage. So was it bad scheme or was it you weren't able to execute what you wanted to do? It was both, right? It was the quarterback play and it was the OC. So I think the lean here is probably Utah, but I don't doubt what Michigan is doing. But if you would say, all right, make a hire, would you rather have Jason Beck or Chip Lindsey? I might pick Jason Beck, but I don't think Lindsey's a bad move. And then Kyle Whittingham, the track record. The idea that Kyle Whittingham, I think, is not allowing himself to get stale. I want to give him credit for that. So I would go Utah here.
Yeah, I go Utah. I think the fact that the losing season last year was just so uncommon for Whittingham in his time at Utah.
Yeah,
I like the Beck. The Beck hire is a bigger, more interesting swing/transformation than I think hiring Lindsey is. Lindsey is like sensible, I think, right? It's not the most exciting thing in the world, but I do think it's a sensible hire.
I think it's good. I think it's good.
Yeah. I positions Michigan to be better certainly this year than they were last year. I'll take Utah. Also, like, I don't know how many games is Romo going to coach this year. I don't know.
Well, we'll get to intangibles.
So
how much? We're just judging
Utah.
him on his ability, and now we'll figure out how many times he'll actually be on the sideline.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to intangibles. I will start with Michigan here. Of course, how much penalties might hang over the team, might directly affect the team is a gigantic question mark for Michigan, right? They could have things that absolutely affect them on the field this year. At the moment, Michigan is reportedly going to self-impose a 2-game suspension for Sharon Moore in weeks 3 and 4 against Central Michigan and Nebraska. And I do think that will include like not coaching at practice. So like that's a big deal, right? I think it makes it at least a little tougher to go win at Nebraska when you have that. And we don't know what the NCAA might do. They might extend that, right? So you're looking probably at least 2 games, but maybe more. So there's a real thing here that just doesn't apply to any other team in the country the way that it applies to Michigan, that their program's on hold. The hearings this Friday and Saturday, and then they'll find out probably sometime in August about the future of their program. And so for this discussion, we'll talk about that more later in the show, but for this discussion, like that could affect on-field performance, both logistically, our coach isn't here, and also, hey, we got penalties. We didn't get penalties. It's over. We're free. It wasn't that bad. Could be a boost to Michigan. Sure. Oh man, these things happen to us now, even though, if they're banned from the postseason this year, how does that affect how players play this year? I think that has some effect. Again, I don't think there's going to be a postseason ban, but the intangibles here are off the charts for Michigan.
Yeah, no one else has intangibles like this, like you said. I guess the one thing is Michigan has experience having to play without its head coach. It's had to do it the last couple of years and actually done okay. Despite that,
did great. So they won a national title with their head coach on the sidelines like 40% of the time.
Right. So maybe Michigan is uniquely qualified to navigate that, but without knowing the extent of it, it's hard to say what kind of impact it'll have.
And I also wanted to say, just from a schedule perspective, I feel like they are playing 6 teams who really want to prove something by beating Michigan. That Michigan is like the right exact level of opponent for these 6 teams, which is very good, respected, talented, but also it's not quite Georgia, right? Mm-hmm. So at Oklahoma in week 2, at Nebraska, Wisconsin, at USC, Washington, Michigan State. They have their end of the year. That's 6 of their first 8 games is like solid programs who want to get after it against Michigan. That it's going to be a weird thing to have to navigate, I think. And the only 2 easy ones are New Mexico and Central Michigan to start the year. Then the end of the year, they get Purdue, Northwestern Maryland before Ohio State. But I thought that was interesting, right? Because I don't know how good Oklahoma and Nebraska Wisconsin, USC, Washington, and Michigan State are going to be. But I think they all might be pretty good. And I think there's 2 or 3 teams in there who actually might be quite a bit better than what people are thinking. And Michigan has to deal with them.
Yeah. And like there's going to be Oklahoma like desperately needs that game. So there's going to be a lot of emotion there. Yeah. Michigan State throwing the rivalry aspect of it.
I mean, to get Michigan, for Nebraska to get Michigan in Lincoln, probably without Sharon Moore in September, feels like, I don't know if desperate's quite the right word, but man, that is a huge game for Nebraska.
Huge game for Nebraska.
Huge.
Yeah.
Jeff Grimes is a new OC at Wisconsin. Like, can Luke Fickell, like, that's like that'd be a job-saving game for Wisconsin. And the same thing at USC. Lincoln Riley, they get a home win against Michigan. I just, like, it is, they're going to have a bunch of targets on them. Anyway, how about Utah? Any intangibles, any schedule stuff?
I think the intangibles are sort of what we talked about. It's just like the general question of has this in any way sort of run its course with Kyle Whittingham? I think no, not yet, or at least he's like going to get a chance to show this year that it hasn't. And you and I think like the moves that he's made to kind of push that off a little bit. I guess like if there's any whiff at all during the season of this, is this actually Kyle Whittingham's last year? Because like they have established that when he does step down, Morgan Scalley will take over. How that might impact things, I guess, could be interesting. Aside from that, I think it's fairly run of the mill season. I do think the schedule. I think the schedule by Big 12 standards could be difficult. It is hard, if not foolish, to try to project what exactly the Big 12 is going to look like. But at the moment, sort of the only things we have that guide us are like odds to win the conference title and SP plus. So by those two metrics, this is a pretty tough Big 12 schedule. There are 7 teams with 10-1 or better odds of winning the Big 12 this year, according to FanDuel. A list that includes Utah. Of the other 6, Utah plays 5. They play Kansas State, Arizona State, and Texas Tech at home in Salt Lake City. They play Baylor and BYU on the road. So that's about as tough as it gets as for a Big 12 schedule. I guess it's nice to have 3 of those games at home and not on the road, but it's still going to be difficult. Two road games in the non-conference at UCLA to open the year in the Rose Bowl, and then they're playing at Wyoming, which like Wyoming is a little bit in a bit of a rut right now, but that's like an old Mountain West rivalry that has some emotions tied to it too, geographical familiarity. Like that could be actually maybe a tricky non-conference test for Utah. So the win total, as you said, is 7.5. I think it makes sense based off how the schedule plays out. It kind of comes in waves between September 20th and October 18th. So it's a 5-week stretch. There's an off week built in there. Utah plays Texas Tech, at West Virginia, Arizona State, and at BYU. And then it kind of cools off a little bit. And then it closes the year with a road game at Baylor, home against Kansas State, and at Kansas to end the season. So I like Utah as a Big 12 contender this year, but I don't want to pretend like the schedule's easy because it could end up being quite difficult.
Utah's not waiting on the NCAA, so I think Utah gets the intangibles edge here. So that's 5-2 for Utah. We gave Utah quarterback, offensive line, secondary, coaching, and intangibles. We gave Michigan skill and the defensive front 7. I will say this about Michigan. I think their defense is definitely going to be good and maybe could be great. I think their backfield could be great. I can see how their offensive line could really come together. I think you have questions at receiver, but that's nothing new at Michigan. And Bryce Underwood, we know what the deal is. And that's just a freshman quarterback who it's hard, I think, to expect him to be awesome in September, but it certainly is not hard to imagine him being awesome in November. So I think both Michigan and Utah are playoff contenders. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah.
Because Michigan has a freshman quarterback and this NCAA thing and Utah doesn't, I think I would rather be Utah in 2025. But that could be wrong, and I could see one of or both of these teams in the college football playoff.
I can see them both there. I'd rather be Utah for 25 just because there's too many variables that we don't know yet with Michigan that I would just rather avoid. And if you're giving me a team like Utah that I think has a reasonable path to the college football playoff as well, I'll take that team. But like it's not a question for me of like programs or anything like that, or even long term. It's just like snapshot 2025. I'd rather be Utah.
On the football, I think there's a lot to like about Michigan in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
So if it winds up being about the football, then I think it's mostly a question of how quickly Bryce Underwood develops, and are the receivers good enough for him to have some targets to throw to? And if both of those questions get answered pretty well, then I think we're they don't play Penn State. They don't play Oregon. I think we very possibly are looking at like a 10-2 Michigan year and a 9 seed in the playoff. Like if
I think Michigan. Yeah, I think Michigan. Well, I would be pretty surprised if Michigan doesn't have championship level defense. I think.
Yes.
But I don't know about the offense.
So it's one of those things like championship level defense, championship level running back room. Like we've seen that work at Michigan a lot. So, all right, that was long, but there was a lot to discuss. And now we're going to get into some of the off-field stuff that's not really about Michigan, but we want to provide context since Michigan is facing this with a Committee on Infractions hearing reportedly on Friday and Saturday. We'll do all of that next on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, back with Bill Landis. If you guys want to send us questions and comments, ask KOTN@gmail.com. Give us a review on Apple Podcasts. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube. Tell a friend. We appreciate everybody for being here. We couldn't do a show if nobody watched and listened. Is this context useful, Landis, for us to talk about things that have happened in the past as Michigan is facing this right now?
Yes and no. I think yes, because context is always important. The only reason I say no is because if you're going to go through some of these things that have happened, they're all like off the field, right?
It is a very rare situation.
Yeah.
Specifically what Michigan is dealing with here with the sign stealing investigation and allegations. And that, to your point, so much of this stuff in the past is either weird player ineligibility, and we'll run through some of it, of the things they used to bang programs for. That's like, oh my God, I think it's a paperwork error and you took their championship away. For real. There's a lot of like, I don't think you filled out Part 3 of Form D correctly. Give us back the trophy. And people are like, we meant to sign it. We just checked the wrong box. And the NCAA says, too bad. You don't exist anymore. And then the rest of it is, we paid players. Yeah, we paid a lot of players. Or we faked their homework so they could keep playing. So that's most of what it is. It's breaking rules to get players on the field. And then if the NCAA catches you and says, well, you broke the rules to get them on the field, so then everything they did while they were on the field, that's dead. There's not a lot of this, Landis. There's not a lot of trying to gain an edge in the strategy of the game. It's almost unheard of. It's almost unheard of at this level.
I actually can't. Maybe you did in your research. I can't pull off the top of my head another example of a team getting looked at for on-field impropriety.
Yeah. So that's why I don't think anybody can pretend they know exactly what's going to happen, because there's not really much precedent for this kind of thing. What we said we wanted to do was give a little context on the harshest penalties. And this is sort of, if you think Michigan could either get their championship vacated or B, get a postseason ban for the future, what would that mean? How likely is it that it could happen? And if it does happen, what would it mean in the history of the sport? I want to shout out two stories that I leaned on a lot in the research for this. One is one by Matt Norlander at CBS Sports from 2019, where he said he asked the NCAA for all the times where a championship team has vacated a title. And they were like, yeah, okay, here it is. And so then he listed all of that. And that's what I'm going by here, because otherwise there's an NCAA infractions database that you can try to wade through. And on one hand, it's very good. But on the other hand, in trying to search for some of the stuff, you get dragged down on gobbledygook and it's hard to be definitive. So thanks to Matt Norlander for that. And the other one is a story by Banner Society. Alex Kirshner, now of Split Zone Duo, and Matt Brown did a story in 2019 on like the 123 best teams who were ever banned from the postseason. And again, they said they waded through the database, and I relied on them, and I double checked a lot of things. And then I tried to look at things since their story came out, but this is a lot of their work. So thanks to people who go do a lot of research, because I also was digging around. You ever been in the infractions database? You can lose yourself, brother. Holy moly.
Nope. Never spent any time. Maybe I should have, but I never looked through it.
I was knee deep in the infractions database. Let's talk first about vacating a title. If somehow this is what would happen to Michigan. By my count, there are 13 titles that have been vacated. By my count, by Matt Norlander's account. Mm-hmm. And then the hard part of this is that the NCAA does not run the football championship. So the only vacated football title, I think, is the 2004 BCS title for USC. But what happened there is that the NCAA like vacated USC's wins because of the Reggie Bush stuff, and then Reggie Bush gave his Heisman back. And the BCS said, well, we're not the NCAA, but we want to go by what the NCAA says. So we will vacate USC's BCS title. And then after the NCAA said, okay, actually, like all this stuff, I don't know. And the Heisman Trust said, well, you know, we're paying players now. And the Heisman Trust gave the trophy back to Reggie Bush. He has his Heisman back. But the BCS has not unvacated the title. So that's the vacated football title. And then all these other ones at the Division I level, they're all smaller sports other than Louisville men's basketball in 2013 having their title vacated because they had an assistant coach who was arranging parties for players and recruits with strippers. Which I guess is an edge. I don't know if that helped you win. I don't know. I think maybe it wouldn't help you win. And then so many more of them are just weird, ineligible players. A lot of it from like the 70s and 80s and the 90s where the NCAA just didn't know what to do with foreign players. And teams would have foreign players. And then the NCAA would be like, well, you played for a professional Swiss lacrosse team in 1987, so you're ineligible. And then the college would be like, well, but that Swiss pro team was actually just a bunch of plumbers who paid $20 to be in this league. We don't think we should lose our national championship over that. And the NCAA would be like, nope, too bad. The Swiss plumber league is pros. So like, Howard men's soccer, 1971. UTEP men's cross country, 1983. Tulsa women's golf, 1988. Hawaii men's volleyball, 2002. Lewis University men's volleyball, 2003. Is all this stuff. So the bottom line is, if Michigan would somehow get its national championship in football taken away, it would be the biggest title ever taken away in the history of college sports.
And also would not be an NCAA decision. The college football playoff would have to decide to do it.
So, and this is, so it's complicated, but if you are on the side of Michigan should or is going to have its title vacated, just understand that's what we're talking about. Because the only two that are comparable are USC football in 2004 and Louisville basketball in 2013. And I think this would be bigger than this.
I think it would be too. Yeah.
And then all the other ones are lacrosse, golf, cross country, soccer, volleyball, track, outdoor track, softball. It's just different. So it's not very common.
Did anybody get dinged for outdoor track and indoor track in the same year?
I'll tell you what, Florida State had so much academic fraud throughout its department that they were just like, have you guys won anything in the past 5 years? Because if you did, we're taking your trophy. So that's how Florida State outdoor men's track lost its 2007 national title. Florida State's just lucky they didn't win more stuff in the early 2000s or it all would have been gone. Because they were just like, you guys are cheating at everything. So anyway, that's the context of that. The context is, having a title taken away is a huge, rare deal. That's all.
Which
Is that
is,
worth saying?
Yes, because I feel like it's just been, and granted, like a lot of what I see is Ohio State centric, and I totally understand it. It's like, oh, they're getting a title taken away, as if like it's a thing that happens all the time, and it's like it really does. It really doesn't. Yeah. It
really doesn't. And like Ward Manuel, the Michigan AD, has kind of been on the record saying like, I haven't heard any discussions about that kind of thing. So like that, again, from the Michigan side of things, it feels like that's not a thing that they're thinking about or are necessarily worried about. So it would be a very big deal. The second thing would be a postseason ban. And again, thanks to that Banner Society story and then just looking up some stuff, by my count, of this current 68 Power 4 college football teams, do you know how many have been banned from the postseason at some point in the history of their football programs? Of the 68,
20,
34.
Oh,
so half, for a total of 105 seasons. So this is more common. And also, if you're throwing stones, maybe check yourself to see if this ever happened to your football team before. So, because Michigan so far is a program that has not ever had a postseason ban in football. By my count, current SEC teams, 10 of the 16 have faced a postseason ban, including Auburn being banned from the postseason in 1956, 57, 58, 59, 60, 79, 80, 93, and 94. So I'm just thinking about like,
good for them.
Ole Miss, 87, 88, 89, 95, 96, 17, 18. So there are just some programs who major in this kind of stuff. So 10 of the 16 in the SEC. Current Big 10, 9 of the 18. USC, 59, 82, 83, 2010, 2011. Michigan State, 76, 77, 78. So of our northern teams, I have 12 of our 28 who have ever faced a postseason ban. Michigan State, Illinois, Penn State, Washington, Ohio State, Minnesota, Indiana, Oregon, Kansas State, Kansas, Colorado, and Cincinnati. Quite a run there for Kansas
I have a
State.
question.
Yeah.
What were Indiana and Kansas doing that got them postseason football? I don't have
time to look all of it up, but it's Indiana's was in 1960 and Minnesota's was in, Minnesota's was in 1991. So I'm just, we don't have time to go into it all on the show. So a bowl ban, the point of this is a bowl ban would certainly be more common than a vacated title. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't really do it anymore. Arizona State is the last bowl ban in 2023, but it was self-imposed, trying to get out in front of it. And the one that people are comparing a lot here too is Tennessee did a gazillion things wrong. And on the press release for when Tennessee a couple years ago had their hearing and then their final decision, this is how it began. Over the course, this is how the release from the NCAA. Over the course of 3 seasons, the Tennessee football program committed 18 level 1 violations, encompassing more than 200 individual infractions, most of which involved recruiting rules violations and direct payments to prospects, current student athletes, and their families, according to a decision released by the NCAA Committee on Infractions panel. As a result, Tennessee failed to monitor its football program, and they didn't get a bowl ban. So here's the thing. There's a standard, a level 1 standard, that if they decide your penalties overall are level 1, you're supposed to get a bowl ban by the book. Mm-hmm. But 2 things happened with the Tennessee thing. One is they said Tennessee really cooperated, and they gave them so much credit for cooperating. They said, we're not going to give you a bowl ban. And the other thing is, a couple years ago, the NCAA decided we don't really want to do bowl bans because we don't want to penalize future players. So what they did to Tennessee is they fined them like $8 million, which is they fined them the amount of money that they would make from going to the postseason and going to bowls, right? But they didn't actually ban them from the bowl. So they want to hurt you monetarily. So Michigan could be hurt monetarily here. But the NCAA wants to get out of the business of bowl bans. So I just think we have to understand that. There's a million. Tennessee did so much stuff. They got caught doing so much stuff. No bowl ban. So that's a part of this too. It was much more common in the past. And then also, how much has Michigan cooperated? Well, it seems like they've kind of been fighting on some stuff, but maybe they've been cooperating on some other stuff. And this is where the NCAA gets you. There's stuff that the NCAA talks about in cooperation. Some of the things that can get you bonus points for cooperating is pointing out people that the NCAA should talk to that they wouldn't otherwise know about. So this is like committing a crime and the cops coming to your house and being like, hey, listen, man, if you cooperate, this is going to be much better for you. Is there anybody who like knows what you did that we wouldn't know to talk to that you can point us toward so that we can definitely nail you, but we'll give you a break on the sentencing for you pointing out your friends that you told, yeah, I'm going to rob the store. We don't know who drove the getaway car. Could you give us his number? And if you do that to the NCAA, they'll give you a break.
Nice.
If you run yourself through with the sword, they'll clean up the blood. It's crazy. So they kind of want to get out of the business of this. So I think that matters. Like, I was not an expert on that context until digging into this stuff. I just think people should have that in their heads.
It's good to know, but I also wonder if like the NCAA, which is getting increasingly marginalized in its power to control anything in college football, might want one last hurrah with the opportunity to hammer a team.
They could. Tennessee was not that long ago. Tennessee was kind of like it was a couple years ago, like as we were entering the modern world here, and they kind of didn't do it. And I think, again, it's like 18 level 1 violations and then 4 more and something else. I think it's 22 level 1 violations for Tennessee. And I think Michigan's been accused of 6 at the moment. So I do think Tennessee's a decent threshold of, if they didn't do it to them, are they going to do it now?
Mm-hmm.
So vacating wins as opposed to vacating titles, fines, scholarship reductions. I have no idea what might happen there. But to me, all those type of penalties fall under more common penalties, right? So I didn't dig into everything there, but if you run through the list of schools that have had vacated wins in recent times, it's as long as your arm. Vacating wins. People do that all the time. So anyway, what do you think of this context?
I don't know that it. I mean, I guess it leads me to believe that maybe a title being vacated is not on the table, just because of how much of an outlier that would be. I don't know that it provides me much more clarity on what I think is going to happen, only because of the unprecedented nature of the allegations.
Yeah,
and that also, like, it's combined. They can kind of lump it all together, can't they? Like the NCAA too, with like the stuff with the recruiting, the stuff with maybe even Matt Weiss, and then the stuff with obviously the Connor Stallion, like all of those things getting thrown into the same pot. It's just really hard to kind of wrap your mind around.
They don't like repeat stuff.
Yeah.
If you've done stuff before, now you're doing something again. They don't like that. So I think all that does matter. I wanted to run this. We talked about this on January 29th on our show as some stuff came out about this. And I want to run the clip of what we said then about these Michigan allegations and potential penalties and just see in the last 4 months, have our minds changed at all? So, Mike, let's run this clip from the show on January 29th. I think they did it to at least some degree. I think it gave them an unfair advantage on the field. I don't think it completely delegitimizes their national championship. I actually think it probably helped them more in the previous 2 years than it did in the national championship year. I'm glad the Big Ten acted when it did. But I do think in the court of public opinion, history will look back on this, and this will be part of the Michigan discussion around this. But I don't know that we're going to get to a point where there's going to be unbelievable punitive punishments as a result beyond what we already have, which includes a show cause for Harbaugh, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know that we have proof. From what I've seen so far, I don't think this was necessarily a top-down directive from Jim Harbaugh. But again, I'm just like, what was the effect? So if that's a too nuanced stance, then I'm not going to make everybody happy. But that's that's what I think. Would you like to state for the record your official bullet point conclusions of where it stands at the moment?
I think I agree with almost everything you said. I probably think that there was more of an advantage gained just generally overall than you do, including in 2023, because it's not like they forgot that information in 2023, even if the operation was found out that year. But I still think Michigan had good football teams those years too, and the NFL draft data bears that out. And they had good coaching staffs too. Some of what the guys have done since they've gone up to the league, I think, bears that out. So it's the difficulty in this is quantifying exactly what the advantage was, but I do think it was substantial. And I don't, and that's my opinion. I don't know that we'll ever be able to quantify exactly what it was. I would love to know or have more information about exactly what the scope of all this was. I don't think it was a top-down directive, but I do think when it was found out, it was allowed to persist perhaps from the top down, which is maybe just as bad. And I don't think there's going to be monster penalties for it either. I just like I think, you know, if you want to see Michigan have its wins vacated and its title taken away, and that will make you feel right about this, then I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I don't know that changes a whole lot. And like I said, unless it's Michigan's not allowed to play football for a period of time, then I'm not getting super fired up about what other punishments might be doled out.
We were so young. We were so young back in January, weren't we? My God.
Both wearing blue.
Remember those days?
Yeah, we're both wearing blue.
My God, back in the day. Has your mind, anything that you said then that you would change today?
I think I probably expect whatever punishment is handed out to be a little more severe than I was thinking back then. And that is some of the stuff that's come out since then, right? And the thought process that I don't know that I was thinking this at the time, that it can all sort of be lumped together. Like these sort of two very obvious and public incidents, and then this third thing with Matt Weiss, which is like kind of weird, but I still think might get thrown into it too. I don't think that means, like, I'm not sitting here believing that Michigan's going to get its title taken away necessarily. But at the time we recorded that, I don't know that I felt that even like a postseason ban would be on the table. And I'm not predicting that there will be, but I suppose I feel like that is a greater possibility than I did whatever that was 5 months ago.
Okay. I don't know that I've changed much. So I don't think I've changed much. So I think it's going to be in the history books. We'll talk about it a certain way. But I am not waiting for Michigan to get the hammer. So, and again, I mean, if they get a big fine and scholarship reductions, and maybe Sharon Moore gets suspended for 4 games instead of 2, like, is that the hammer? I don't know. Right. So I don't, but yeah. I'm not, I think there was an advantage gained, but I think it's an unusual case in a lot of ways that I think makes it a little difficult. And I'll be curious. I'm very curious about it, but I'm not waiting for Michigan to be destroyed by the penalties. So that's where we are. The hearing is this weekend by every report, and then we should find something out before the season starts. And it certainly has a chance to affect the Michigan football program in some way. Okay. When we come back, what you watching, what you eating, what you thinking on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, back with Bill Landis. Landis, you watching anything good lately? What you watching?
No, I haven't watched anything new. I was watching. I think my watching and thinking might be combined, because I was watching something, and then but I also want to ask you a question based off of that I think you have more knowledge of than I do. I was watching yesterday afternoon the French Open, and I was watching Carlos Alcaraz against Tommy Paul. And I don't think I have ever seen someone get so thoroughly dominated in a tennis match that far into an event, nor have I seen a men's tennis match end as quickly as that one did, which lasted, I think, 94 minutes. And I know Tommy Paul was injured. He has like a leg thing and like an abdominal thing, and like was laboring during the match. And they were even asking I don't know if it was his coach or his dad or whatever, like, is he going to withdraw? And he said, no, he's going to play through it. But man, Alcaraz destroyed him. Which was one, like, incredibly impressive. Like, I know he's good. I don't watch a ton of tennis, but like I understand like Carlos Alcaraz and Yannick Sinner are the two dudes right now. But watching that, and then I know TFO had lost earlier in the day, and I guess I hadn't realized how long it has been since an American has won American male has won a Grand Slam title in tennis. Which then got me to Eddie Roddick in 2003, which then got me to thinking, and I've wanted to ask you because I know you pay attention to tennis more than I do. Are the American men cooked in tennis, and how did that come to pass?
We're actually in a little bit of a revival, and this is something like this is I could bore people to death for 30 minutes on this, because I was a high school tennis player at a time of the greatest run of American men's tennis ever, which is the Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi, Jim Courier, Michael Chang era, where American men were just like dominating men's tennis, and it was like the greatest thing ever, and then it just vanished. Our best athletes don't play tennis, so I think in other countries some of their best athletes do play tennis, right? If
it's a similar conversation to soccer, we hear that a lot with soccer too.
Yannick Sinner is Italian. Musetti, who's also in the semis, is Italian. If you're a great Italian athlete, I think you probably either play soccer or tennis. And this always because I covered him in my career covering Major League Baseball, Scott Rowland, who just is a new inductee into the Baseball Hall of Fame, was a great high school tennis player. And then you think about a guy like that who's a great defensive third baseman and like has great lateral quickness and is quick twitch, but is also strong. It's like, what could Scott Rowland have won a Grand Slam in men's tennis? I think maybe he could have, but he chose to be a Hall of Fame third baseman instead. But there's one guy that this is about that you've got to get on board with, and it's Ben Shelton. Ben Shelton is the American who lost to Carlos Alcaraz in the round before Tommy Paul. And Ben Shelton's ceiling can compete with the best players in the world. He just doesn't quite know how to win yet. He's the same age as Alcaraz, but he also was a multi-sport athlete, which I think has made him really well-rounded. He played football for a while, but Alcaraz is like a tennis monster. He's a prodigy. And so get on board with Ben Shelton. We are big Ben Shelton fans in my household, and he's not Taylor Fritz is actually the highest ranked American man right now. He lost in the first round. He was the number 4 seed. Tommy Paul is higher than Ben Shelton, but like Shelton's where it's at. Where it's at.
You can see it with Paul, like in the third set, where he like managed to not get run off the court entirely. Like you could see like the way he was fighting through the pain and like moving around in some of the shots he hit. Like there's obviously a very good player in there, but I was just thinking to myself again, as someone who doesn't watch a lot of tennis and kind of only pays attention at the end of the Grand Slams, like, boy, if this is the best the Americans have to offer, it doesn't seem like the Americans are in a great spot right now.
Yeah, Ben Shelton's going to win Wimbledon or the U.S. Open, I think, sometime in the next 3 or 4 years. And then it's just like the Williams sisters, especially Serena, just carried American tennis for 2 decades. But also Madison Keys won the Australian, and then Coco Gauff just beat her in the quarters, and Coco Gauff's going to be in the semis. She has a U.S. Open win, so like, or is it Wimbledon? But Coco Gauff's really good. Like the women are in pretty good shape, and the men are coming around. So as much as I understand your frustration, that it's actually better than it's been in a long time.
Okay, that's good to hear. But I do like watching Carlos Alcaraz. He's a freak.
Oh, like he's to root for too. He's a baller. He's like emotional, but he's not a jerk. I would like Shelton and Alcaraz to be like a great. They're like 6 months apart in age.
I didn't know that someone could hit the ball. Like obviously, I know there are people who can really dial it up when they're serving it, but like on the return, some of the speeds that Alcaraz was getting, I was like, I didn't know people could do that.
Yeah. And then Shelton has one of the best serves in tennis. He's super muscly and like he pounds it. So good. I'm excited when you get. I'm glad when you get excited about tennis, man. It's good stuff.
Tennis is fun. Yeah.
Saw Thunderbolts. Have you seen Thunderbolts in the theaters yet?
Is that the Marvel thing?
Marvel thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. apparently there's backstories. I thought it was all new characters who they were unveiling for this movie. And then there was something that was happening. I was like, am I supposed to know who that is? My wife was like, what? They've all been in 3 movies already. And I was like, what are you talking about? So anyway, I know nothing about Marvel, and I felt like I could jump in, and I enjoyed the characters, and they're a little goofy, but I thought the story was good. So I'll give my uninformed Marvel take as a thumb up on Thunderbolts. My other thing is, I feel like I've watched a million TV shows about the uber rich, and I just come away from most of the episodes wanting a missile to hit their mansion. And the end of the episode is, and then all the rich people exploded because they're so annoying. And I'm a little confused as to the latest one is this one called Sirens. That's Julianne Moore, annoying the heck out of me. Friends and Neighbors with John Hamm just ended. The uber rich, not just like rich people, but like I have a $250,000 watch kind of rich people. And I'm a little confused as to why they keep giving us so much of the uber rich. I feel like I just watched Big Little Lies recently, which I know is like 8 years old. That was Nicole Kidman. The Perfect Couple was in the last 2 years. That was Nicole Kidman. The Undoing was like 5 years ago. That was Nicole Kidman. And they're all gazillionaires. They're all just like, my house costs $75 million. And I'm not like an eat the rich kind of guy, but after these TV shows, it is hard not to be. I'm so annoyed by them. Why do we keep making these shows, Landis? Can't we just make shows about regular folk?
As this because there was, and I think it still exists, but there used to be obviously a large obsession with reality shows about the super rich. Have they now been replaced by scripted content about the super rich? Like that voyeurism is never going to go away, right? Or the desire for it is never going to go away.
Lifestyles of the rich and famous.
Yeah, but now it's more scripted than it is Keeping Up with the Kardashians.
I guess I prefer scripted than to reality, but I also prefer kind of regular people to the uber rich, and I just cannot escape them. So
Sirens is a good cast.
It is a good cast. I hated the first episode. Yeah, Glenn Howerton like popped up, and I was like, "What? He kind of seems out of place here." Anyway, all right. What are you eating?
I went back home over the weekend for a family party and got to partake of a world delicacy that is never gets the credit that it is due, and that is I went to a diner and had pork roll for breakfast.
There you go.
One of the mornings I was there, so I don't know why it blew my mind when I left the East Coast. Even when I moved. My first job was in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is like 2 hours west of Philadelphia, a little bit west of Harrisburg. I felt like even then pork roll was kind of hard to find and certainly not consumed as regularly as it was growing up for me. And then when I moved to Ohio, it's just like no one's ever heard of this food that you're talking about.
Right.
Pork roll and or Taylor ham if you're from New Jersey. It's the same thing. I think it's the best breakfast meat you could have. Nothing is better than a pork roll, egg and cheese sandwich on a nice Kaiser roll. And I miss it dearly in my life. So I was happy to be able to have some while I was back home this weekend.
So describe it for us. Like, is it more like a sausage? Is it more like bacon? Like what
it's more like a sausage. It's more like a sausage. I don't even know, like flavor wise, maybe even more like closer to ham. But like saltier. Than I guess that a ham would be. I don't even know what it is. I've never looked into what it is. We have another thing we have another thing we eat a lot in Philly, scrapple, which like I never really toes. That's all toes and noses and stuff. Like I like it, I'll eat it, but I never got into it much. I suppose pork roll is a similar idea. The only time I've ever seen it in Ohio, which like I've never seen it this way in Philadelphia. Like in Philadelphia, you just buy a box that comes like pre-sliced. There's 4 or 8 slices of pork roll in there. They're circular. One time I saw it in Ohio and it was like a full pork roll log. Ooh, I was like, what is this? I bought it. I brought it home with me. And I cut it up and I ate it, but I don't encounter it all that often. And that was years ago that I found it. So I would say that it is like a cross between like a ham and a sausage.
Okay.
That is primarily, you can eat it, for lunch or dinner if you want to, but it is primarily consumed at breakfast. Yeah.
Yeah. Bring it to the Midwest.
I have to go back out that way at the end of the month. I think when I do, I might bring some pork roll back with me.
Just bring a trailer's worth of pork roll and open up a little shop in your house.
Yeah.
So I am really down the road on yogurt and fruit for breakfast, which is quite a change for me. But I just want to shout out granola because, and I know I'm not the only person here, but is crunch arguably the most important thing in eating? Because I could not eat a bowl of yogurt and fruit if I didn't have the crunch of granola with it. And I don't know if I am more crunch addicted than many people. I love a salad, but I have to have croutons in it because I've got to have a crunch, right?
But
like
you can even get a minor crunch from the lettuce in a salad if you have the right kind of lettuce.
True.
Right?
It's not, I mean, like sometimes I'll eat some brown slimy lettuce if I'm trying to.
I won't touch lettuce if there's even a hint of brown or sliminess in it.
Really? Yeah. You got the fridge race against the bag of lettuce and the date, because it always goes bad before the date.
Yes.
How important is crunch to you? Is this a unifying thing that everybody watching and listening is nodding along? Yes, Doug, it matters if stuff is crunchy. Or are some people fine with like, I'm good with just yogurt and a blueberry?
No,
I don't need.
I think it matters. I do think it matters. Like texture and food is I have found as I gotten older is like important and desirable. I'm trying to think like foods where you're okay eating it without that element, and it's like ice cream. It's like the only thing I can think of, maybe. But even then, it's like I like a mint chocolate chip ice cream because you get a little bit of a bite from the chip, or you get an ice cream cone and you have that.
When I was a kid, my mom was putting pretzels in ice cream in 1982.
Pretzels and ice cream was great. Yeah. I've had ice cream, I think, with potato chips in it too. Like it enhances it for sure. So no, I don't know if it's universally thought of that way, but I'm with you. I'm with you that even a minor crunch is necessary in most meals.
Yeah. And I'm glad it's like pseudo healthy. I went to IKEA to get some European granola the other day. I was like, I don't need a desk, but they have good granola there. So God bless granola. That's all I can say. It makes yogurt palatable. What do you think?
I'm not a big granola guy.
Oh, come on. Come on.
But I do like it. I don't mind like a yogurt parfait with some granola and a little bit of honey in there.
Yeah. There you go.
I got my thinking out of the way already with my question to you about tennis. So
okay. So this is what I'm thinking about. How bad is it today? So in our job where we just stare at ourselves all day, every day, there's definitely like a hair replacement thing that I've seen online. Whereas like they have the top of somebody's head and then they're like have the more full top of somebody's head. And I look like I'm getting to the before stage of that. And I have this little wisp in the front that it's like this kind of piece of hair by itself. And then there's like a band kind of baldness. And then it's much more thin. And I know like Joe Buck has talked about that he got addicted to hair plugs like 20 years ago, and it almost like ruined his life, and it was like a terrible thing. And I will just say now, having a job where you just stare at yourself all day, and I feel like I've had moments where like, all right, if I just face like this, I'm okay. But if I tilt my head down for something, my whole life, I've said to myself, I'm just going to let it happen. Whatever happens, happens. If the hair goes, if it turns white, like, I don't know, it's what God intended. I can't control. I'm not going to do anything. And I will just like, as you get older then, and then you actually face it, you can feel yourself being like, should I? So what do I'm curious if people want to share their thoughts, if they've done things with their hair, do they color it? Have they done anything to make it a little more full? Should I do something? Am I not quite there yet? But I also feel like sometimes you don't know it yourself, and maybe others notice it. I certainly am having these conversations with the person who cuts my hair. It is the thing of life. When you're young, you think old people are stupid, and when you're old, you think young people are stupid. But like when you start to get old, it's like you're ready to do anything. So I don't know, man. I'm not like all the way there, but I'm starting the process, and I'm thinking about if I should do something about it.
I thought this was going to end with you announcing there was going to be a run of KOTN shows live from Turkey coming up, so you can go get a hair transplant. So no, I mean, like
My
I'm
parents,
losing my.
my parents met in Turkey. You know that,
Well, there
right?
you go. It all comes full
Yeah.
circle. Yeah,
I'm
parents met in
actually a
Turkey.
citizen. Yeah, get a free
Yeah,
transplant.
yeah. Fly back. Turkish Airlines get you there, and get it all taken care of.
Did you say Turkish Airlines or Turkish Hairlines?
Airlines, that's what they call it.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what, like
Okay.
if you take a flight back from Istanbul to the States, it's just full of guys with sweat headbands on and the top of their heads bleeding. So like it's a very common thing. No, I'm I'm follically challenged as well. There was a brief moment like a month or two ago where I was considering growing my hair back out, and then it got like to a certain point, still very early stages. I'm like, this is just not for me because it's very thin on the top. So this is my look. This is my look for the rest of my life. My barber actually has a very similar hairline to me, and he got his hair lasered off, so he doesn't have to worry about it. Like I have to go every 2 weeks to like get it cut to like this length or shorter. He just got his all lasered off. He also got his beard line lasered, so like he just has to trim his beard. He doesn't ever have to line it up, and he doesn't do anything on his head because he just got it all zapped off, which is interesting. But also, he said was incredibly painful, which I don't think I'm cut out for that. So, I think it's very common to think about what you're thinking about. I have accepted just letting nature take its course and just shaving my head for the rest of my life. But part of it too, it's like, you know what, we had Stephen Godfrey on. That guy's got a great head of hair, man. And you get on camera with Godfrey. You're like, man, look at that lettuce. And you get a little like, should I do something? So I get it. I have the same thing with my brother. So I have two brothers. One of them is like me. He's losing his hair. And the youngest one like has a great head of hair. And I don't know why. And no one else in my family, like on either side, like has gone bald. But for some reason, me and my middle brother both are losing our hair. And I don't
like it. Yeah. So what do you think I should, am I there yet?
I don't think you're there yet. No, I think you can still
rock down the road.
You're rocking. Yeah. Have you considered letting it grow out and see what happens?
It gets worse. I'm at the point where it has to be. If I let it grow out, now it feels like I'm getting to like the swoopy, let's like curl my hair around my head to cover the bald spot stage.
Yeah.
But it's this thing at the front, right? Where there's this little patch at the front and then the line of kind of like no hair.
Yeah.
And depending what mood I'm in when the show's starting, it can be like it's 11:51 and I'm standing in front of the mirror with my little hair swoop in the front, and I'm like, I don't care if the show starts late. I've got to get my swoop ready, you know. So,
Could you do this? Could you just take it all off and go with what I'm rocking with?
I mean, I've done I don't know, because here's the thing too. This is what everybody does when you go shave or bald on top. When you go short on top, then everybody grows a beard or a mustache, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm ready for that transformation yet, because I feel like it's a 2-part transformation. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to hold on desperate. Like Tom Thibodeau from the Knicks just got fired, and that's like every time the Knicks were on TV, it was like, that guy's hair. Like someone's got to tell him. Yeah. He's holding on to that swoop in the front, and someone's.
He looks like the guy from Despicable Me. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm curious. I would be curious for anybody like what you do. Any of the folks out there who have gone through this, what decisions you've made to just let it go, to maybe do something about it. I'm not trying to call anybody out, but I think it's a very normal thing to deal with. But it may be a little bit ramped up when you're just staring at your mug.
Yeah.
Every day. Yeah. It's like, oh, don't tilt my head too much. Anyway, that's why I put the hat on.
Also, from now on, only bald guests.
Godfrey's done. Or it's just permanent dog mentality, right? I mean, I just dog mentality 24/365 now. It's like, God, that guy really loves making fun of George. It's like, no, he's just going bald. All right.
I had somebody tell me that because I used to wear hats like every day when I was a kid. I had somebody tell me that I'm losing my hair because I wore a hat all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Is there any science behind that?
I think I covered Terry Francona as a baseball manager for a while, and he was perfectly bald, like with a hat shape on his head. You know what I mean? Like and it was like, well, you've been in baseball your whole life. Your dad was a baseball player. You've been in baseball clubhouses since you were 8. You've worn a hat every single day, and your hair died. That makes sense to me. You killed your hair.
Like grass needs sunlight and water.
I'll start watering my head and see what happens. All right, that's it for this edition of Kings of the North. We know we went long on Michigan, Utah, but there's a lot to talk about with 2 interesting teams for this year. And now we'll just, we're not going to get a resolution on anything, I don't think immediately, unless somehow they come to like a negotiated resolution more quickly. But anyway, we just wanted to get in that final context on Michigan. So we will be back on Monday. We'll have another KOTN showdown. And I think, Landis, it's time for us to do another round of playoff picks because we have not done them post-spring. And so I do think it's valuable for us to check in with ourselves through several stages of the offseason to see how our thinking evolves. And I think we've only done one version of playoff picks, and I think we got to do a second version next week.
I'm excited to check back in on that one because I forget what I've said previously, but also
Yes.
I think I've changed my mind on a couple of things. So
yeah, so I think we'll plan that. As always, we appreciate you guys for being here live on the YouTube chat, listening back on podcast, watching back on YouTube. Certainly grateful for your presence here and making this show what it is. Thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yorstowski, for making us look good and sound good. We'll see you next week. For now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.